Sup, guys? It's Toad back again as usual. Another day, another betting card to break down. This is going to be baseball, of course, because that's the majority of what we have going on. It's Monday. It's a small card in general. You got fewer baseball games and, of course, a Monday night football game, which, if you watch my football videos, you know I am on the Atlanta Falcons +6 tonight. I still like it, even though this is primetime Kirk Cousins. He gets shit for not doing well in primetime, but they're getting points. So like I said, you don't need them to win the game. I think with Atlanta, you're getting the better defense, getting points here. So I like that aspect of it as well. I think that what you saw out of the Eagles offense, Saquon Barkley in that Brazil game, I think is a little bit misleading because the turf was all chewed up there. So it really affected the defense's ability to adjust and react to where offensive players were going and where they were making their moves. So I think that really had an impact. I mean, it impacted the Eagles defense too, with Jacobs putting together a really good running performance too. So I wouldn't take that much away from it on either side. So I'm not saying the Eagles are going to be as bad defensively either, but if it turns into a defensive game, that's what you want when you're taking +6 with the Atlanta Falcons, right? So that's what we're still going to be doing. The line, I don't think you're going to get 6 anymore, and we can look at the market here on this. I don't think you're going to get this to go back to 6. I don't know. It's sitting at 5.5 right now. I think because of the A.J. Brown news, I think is affecting this a little bit. So he's going to be out for the Eagles, which I don't think that's going to really matter as far as the Eagles would be the side just because of the injured player theory. I don't think so. Eagles remain public with 82% of tickets. Looks like they have more of the cash now with 84%. I'm not sure I actually buy that. I wouldn't read that much into it. I still think they are a public Monday night favorite, which on these primetime games, man, with the larger influx of betting, especially, like in the NFL, you have all these bettors that lost money and whatever, and then they want to come in and try to recoup some of their losses and play on that Monday night game. So the Monday night game gets a lot of play, especially when it's a game involving the Philadelphia Eagles, who are a pretty popular team. So I still think that fading the public is going to be the way to go here, and is typically the way to go generally. Of course, I'd rather have 6 or 6.5 than 5.5. I don't think that it's going to make that much of a difference, though, if you still wanted to play the Falcons. I don't hate it. With A.J. Brown out, it's an interesting situation because the Eagles have some new wide receivers, and I think their rookie wide receiver from Florida State, I think he's hurt, so he's probably not playing. Not that you would want to play anybody from Florida State. No, I'm just kidding. All of Florida State's good players just happen to be in the NFL now. That's why they're so bad this year. With this Eagles wide receiver situation, injury situation, I think they have Jahan Dotson is their number 2 wide receiver now, I think, basically with Brown out, and he's new to the team. So it's a very weird situation where Devontae Smith is the only wide receiver on this team who has caught a pass for the Eagles since the beginning of last season. He's the only one who's there. So you have an entirely new crew or core of wide receivers there. How much of an effect is that going to have? I don't know, but I don't think that's really great for the Eagles. And Hurts did struggle at times in that game against Green Bay. I mean, Green Bay, they're kind of a ball-hawking defense. They definitely go after the ball and try to create turnovers, and they did against Hurts. Hurts turned the ball over 3 times in that game. So him being down a wide receiver is probably not going to be that helpful, really, in this game. So again, I like the Falcons. I expect them to bounce back from what looked like an ugly performance in week 1, but their defense certainly showed up in that game. And I don't know how much we can take away from Kirk Cousins having a bad game because he's having to adjust to a new offense. So it is going to take some time. Now that he has a game under his belt, I think we can expect that he's going to start getting a little bit better. He's learning a new offense, and he's coming back from an Achilles injury. But before that, when he was on Minnesota, he was putting up some pretty good stats with Minnesota. So I don't think what we saw out of him in week 1 is really indicative that he's just going to be doomed for the rest of his playing time. I don't think so. I think he should start to improve. And that Pittsburgh defense, we saw them show up again yesterday. Granted, it was against Bo Nix, but that Pittsburgh defense looked very, very good again yesterday. Eagles defense is not as good as as what that Pittsburgh defense has been doing. So Kirk Cousins probably should have a little bit of an easier time in this one. And Atlanta should be able to establish the run, I would think. I mean, they were able to kind of do it last week as well, but they have good running backs there, and that should also take the load off of Kirk Cousins. Like, he shouldn't need to do everything there and totally be a hero and whatever. Atlanta has good running backs, and they have some decent, like, receivers around him. So Atlanta is still the play there, obviously. I mean, I'm not going to get off of my play on Atlanta there, so that remains the play. We'll look at baseball here. Baseball, we have some big games, man. We have a bunch of teams returning home from road trips, but I don't really see an angle, really that much of an angle to play against any of these teams returning. Like the Mets, I believe, are returning home from a road trip, but they're coming off a big series against Philly, too, where they lost, but they're still fighting for a wild card spot, so they shouldn't totally like lapse in motivation and focus. I think that's going to help mitigate that return home lack of focus spot there. So I really wouldn't want to go against them. Jake Irvin, I think, has decent numbers against them, and Manaea has decent numbers against Washington as well. Not something I totally want to deal with here. It's a big game, though. Detroit-Kansas City is a big game as well. Kansas City is returning home from a road trip. But do I want to fade Kansas City in a spot like this? No, because they're also trying to maintain a wild card spot, although they are sitting up above Minnesota, Detroit, Boston, Seattle. Kansas City is leading in the wild card race, I think, right now. So they're sitting a little bit better, but obviously they still need to win games here to maintain that. Detroit also is going to be pretty heavily motivated, I would imagine, because they're trying to come up in that wild card race and fight. They're coming off a big win over Baltimore yesterday. They won the series against Baltimore, and that might help them. I don't think they're going to be in a letdown, because I don't think there's a letdown when it's a big divisional series with huge wild card implications. So I would throw that idea out, and I think they might be like continuing some momentum there. So this is an interesting one, but I don't want to deal with it because the Kansas City, like I said, they're in the return home spot, which is typically negative. I don't think it will be when it's a big series like this. Kansas City has Seth Lugo pitching. He has pretty dominant numbers in his career against Detroit. He's been pitching pretty well, and Detroit, yet again, has not decided on a starting pitcher. It seems like Detroit's doing this intentionally almost, just so the opponents don't know until like right before game time who the pitcher is going to be. But I think that goes both ways, because Detroit, like, if you're the pitcher and you don't even know like if you're starting or not, who's starting, I don't think that's great either. I don't know, but Detroit keeps seemingly waiting for the longest time out of all the teams in Major League Baseball to determine who their starting pitcher is going to be. It's kind of crazy. That kind of throws a wrench into trying to handicap that game, too, so I'm not even going to attempt to do so. Cleveland and Minnesota is interesting. Cleveland's staying at home. Minnesota is starting a road trip, coming off a not very good series against Cincinnati, where they'd give up a lot of runs in those first two games. They turned it around yesterday and played better. Now they're going out on the road, which I think that should help them as well. That should help them focus. Minnesota, I think, probably should be the more focused out of these two teams, because Cleveland is sitting atop the division, so Minnesota should be the somewhat more motivated team here because they're battling for the wild card positioning. Obviously, Cleveland is sitting prettier atop the division, so they have some more padding there, but it is still a big divisional game. So I'm not saying Cleveland's just not going to show up. I don't think that's the case either. Cleveland, their bullpen is really kind of used up after last night, so that's kind of an issue. I think Cleveland's bullpen is actually pretty good, but they used like all of their good relief pitchers yesterday to try to hold off Tampa. So their bullpen is in a much worse situation coming into this game than Minnesota's is. Minnesota did not use as many of their relievers yesterday, and I think they avoided using like basically all of their best relievers. So their bullpen is in much better shape in this game. But you'll have to get it to the bullpens for Minnesota to be able to do this. So I was considering maybe full game on Minnesota. It looks like one of the stronger market leans. You can see Minnesota's moving up from minus 105 to minus 110. 55% of the cash is on them. 79% of the tickets on the other side. So Cleveland's public. Because, of course, the public's going to come in and say, wait a minute, Cleveland with the better record, I'm getting them at home as an underdog? Like, what gives here? Well, that's the odds makers telling you Minnesota probably has the better of this matchup somehow, especially with the starting pitching. I think they do, but I don't quite want to do it. So right now, all those factors make it seem like I should play Minnesota, right? Because they're the team that should have a little bit more motivation because they're battling for the wild card, even though that might be a little bit more pressure on them. Their bullpen is in much better shape. The odds on the game, the line looks a little bit suspect, like the odds makers almost want you to take Cleveland. All of that is true, but I also look at the starting pitching matchup specifically against these opposing hitters. So I think Pablo Lopez is absolutely the better pitcher in this matchup. His stats are really good this year. 3.88 ERA, 1.13 whip. I think his strikeout walk numbers are insane. Yeah, 183 strikeouts is one of the higher number of strikeouts in all of baseball. 35 walks, not too bad. Really good ratio there because the strikeouts are so high. 23 home runs allowed isn't great. 157 hits and 169 in a third innings is pretty good. He doesn't allow many hits. He's continuing to pitch pretty consistently. Strikeout walk ratio remains really good. His ERA was misleadingly bad early on, but he is a good pitcher looking at all of his stats. You knew that ERA was going to come down, or I knew because I kept telling you, and it did. And he had a 1.71 ERA in August, and he's kind of just continuing that into September with a 1.98 ERA and 19-2 strikeout walk ratio. So why am I not on Minnesota? I lean to the Minnesota side still, but looking at his stats against Cleveland, it makes it difficult for me to do, man. Cleveland has a big 74 at-bat sample size against him, and they've put together some nice hitting against him, extra base hits there, a lot of extra base hits. 351 batting averages Cleveland, what they hit against Lopez, with an 853 OPS. So Lopez specifically does struggle against Cleveland, so that's what keeps me off of that a little bit. I would definitely not play this as a first 5-inning bet. You want this game to be close enough that it gets to the bullpens, and then Minnesota's the advantage that I think they have in the bullpen rest situation can then kind of take hold in this game and take over. I do think Lopez is the better pitcher out of him and Matthew Boyd. Boyd is kind of an enigma right now, man. He's 33 years old. He's never been that good a pitcher, really, I don't think. But then for some reason, yeah, I think he wasn't pitching in the majors for most of this year. He made some minor league starts this year. Stats. That is how we pronounce it in Boston almost. He made some minor league starts, and his minor league numbers are actually really good this year. It's like he's coming from out of nowhere almost with this kind of career resurrection. I don't really know what to think about it. It's bizarre. And then since he's come up to the majors, he's put together a 2.18 ERA, 0.91 whip. I still think he's the less trustworthy pitcher between him and Lopez. I mean, we're still looking at a sample size of 6 starts here, but his numbers have been quite good over the 6 starts. 35-7 strikeout walk ratio, 23 hits allowed in 33 innings pitched. It's all, it's strange because I don't think that he can continue pitching like this, but who knows, really. And his numbers against Minnesota, big 92 at-bat sample size, are actually significantly better than Lopez's are. 239 average and 634 OPS. So that starting pitching matchup, if you look at the individual matchup stats there between the starting pitchers and the hitters they're going to be facing, the picture kind of becomes cloudy, whereas it almost looked like it was kind of a clear play on Minnesota before looking at that. So I'm not going to do it. I don't want to get involved in it. What else we got? We got Milwaukee returning home from a road trip as well, where they went out to the West Coast, and they played these crazy high-scoring games, won the series against the Diamondbacks. So you think they could be in a letdown spot here potentially after doing all that? I mean, they're really not in danger of missing the playoffs. They have a big 10-game lead in their division. So it is possible they kind of lapse in focus, although it is a big team coming into their house, Philadelphia. But Philadelphia needs this game more. And they're coming off a big series, too, against the Mets. So both teams are coming off big series, but Philadelphia is the one that's starting a road trip here and kind of carrying momentum out on the road trip with them. So scheduling-wise, Philadelphia is in the positive spot, and Milwaukee's in the negative spot. And like I said, Philadelphia, well, I don't know if they really need the game more. I thought this divisional battle was closer with Philadelphia, but they're up to a 9-game lead in their division, too. So both of these teams are sitting pretty nicely atop their division, so neither of these teams really need this game, quote-unquote, although that means they can kind of play a little bit looser. Ranger Suarez, I think, is the better pitcher in this matchup in general, but I said that I thought his season that he was having was not really indicative of what he is. If you look at his career numbers, it was like, how is he having a season this good? And then I think he got injured or something, but he reached a point where he kind of started turning into the Suarez of old, the Suarez that we expect, although his ERA was actually worse than what we'd expect. But I think it was just kind of because he was overperforming most of the season. I think he hit like a really sharp regression, which I think was kind of expected. But I think like what we're getting out of him this month, I think, is kind of indicative of what he really is, even though this is against some bad offenses. Miami and Tampa putting together 3.48 ERA over those two starts. So I think he's a mediocre pitcher, but I do have a problem with this one too, because his stats against Milwaukee are not very good. It's not a huge sample size, 29 at bats, but he's walked 4 guys against them, 8-4 strikeout walk ratio. He's allowed 3 home runs against them, but all of them are from Contreras. So, yeah, it is one guy who's done the most damage to him. So maybe we could ignore these stats a little bit. I mean, I don't think they should be ignored, but you could maybe say that these stats they aren't as bad as they look just because it's all Contreras, and he's only going to face that one specific batter so many times during a start, but it still amounts to a 310 average and 1,015 OPS allowed. I don't really trust Suarez, but I do think he's the better pitcher against Savale, who just doesn't have good numbers this year. 4.57 ERA, 1.32 whip. And he's just been kind of pitching mediocre since he's been with Milwaukee. He hasn't really had that hurt. Like, he's had a couple of starts that I would say are bad against Minnesota and Washington. Other than that, not really. He's been mediocre. He's been okay with them. And against Philadelphia, I think he actually has okay stats. Oops, I went to Oakland there. Philadelphia, what do we got here? Yeah, he's held them to a 0 batting average, but it's 0 for 6 with 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. So only 2 guys have seen him before, but that does mean Philadelphia's lineup actually isn't even familiar with Savale, really, because he's been in the American League, I think, for the rest of his career. So kind of interesting there as well. St. Louis is returning home from a road trip. Not really, but they went to Toronto for a single road series, and they got their asses swept in that road trip. So I was right about the Toronto side yesterday, too. So I think some of my leans were correct yesterday, too. And, oh, by the way, yesterday, 3-0 day yesterday. I didn't mention that. Jared Jones didn't pitch as well as I thought that he would, but Brady Singer kind of struggled through that game as well. And Pittsburgh had the lead throughout most of that game, even though it was close. Their bullpen was able to hold off. Who was Pittsburgh playing against? Was able to hold off Kansas City there. So I won the game on the Pittsburgh Pirates, and then NFL was nice to me as well. I think more than half of my leans got there, but my bets were basically no sweat. Cleveland Browns won outright as a 3-point underdog. It was a really ugly defensive game, like I said it would be. Nailed it. And then Arizona, I thought they would win, but that blowout win was just very unexpected. Marvin Harrison Jr. just kind of coming from out of nowhere and going nuts, kind of, but he only hauled in half of his passes and half of his targets. I mean, I don't know if that's Kyler Murray was just missing him. That could be the case. I don't know. I didn't see all the incomplete passes that were thrown his way, so I don't know if it was on Murray or on Harrison. Probably it was on Murray, to be honest, but Harrison, when he did reel in catches, he was making big plays, even though I think from a fantasy perspective, when you see a guy only make 4 catches and he has 2 touchdowns and 130 yards or something, it's not really that great an indicator. I mean, I play PPR, so I'm looking for like high targets, but he still did have high targets too. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have Harrison on your team. You absolutely should, and he may continue to impress this year. But that was an impressive performance just in general from Arizona there. So a good day for me, a 3-0 day. Maybe we do see some light at the end of this 2024 tunnel here, because I'm only like 1,000 or so off from breaking even now on the year after having not so good a year, and baseball has been part of it, but I'm still making a baseball play here. Anyway, yeah, back to baseball. St. Louis, they got swept. I thought that they would lose yesterday, which they did. So my call was correct on that one, and it doesn't get any easier for them really when they're returning home and having to face Paul Skeens, but I'm not sure that you're getting any value really on playing Paul Skeens. He's a decent-sized road favorite here, down from -140 to -132. He's got 79% of the tickets on him and 91% of the cash. So, yeah, it's not something I really want to get involved in. As far as Minnesota, by the way, they have 55% of the cash with 75% of tickets on the other side on Cleveland now. So that the market continues to indicate on the Minnesota side there, but I don't really want to do it. And like I said, I don't really want to play the public Paul Skeens as well. All right, I'm getting all like kind of schizo here and jumping all over the place. Let's get back to the stuff I was going to talk about here. What was I going to talk about? There are a bunch of teams returning home from road trips. I thought Colorado was one of them. They're not. Anaheim might be. No. And San Diego is. So San Diego's returning home from a road trip where they stayed on the West Coast, and they're facing who are they facing? They're facing Houston, who I think has also been out on the West Coast already. They were already in Anaheim. So they're actually traveling even less than San Diego is coming from San Francisco. But both teams are already adjusted to the time zone, so no issue there. San Diego's returning home and having swept San Francisco, kind of getting a little bit of revenge against them for losing the series to them at home prior to that. A nice series for San Diego. So I think this puts San Diego in kind of a tough spot, man. I don't like the San Diego side in this one. You can see this line has dropped, minus 140 all the way down to minus 132. 78% of tickets on them and 83% of the cash. So they're public. Looks like they do have more of the cash percentage, but because the line's moving down on them, I'm not so sure about that. And San Diego, they may have a little bit more to play for here, though, because they're still fighting for a wild card spot, whereas Houston has been so good since that rough start to the season. They've been like the best team in baseball record-wise since then. They're sitting a little bit nicer. Seattle's not that far off of them, but Houston's still sitting pretty nicely as far as winning their division is concerned. So I don't think Houston necessarily would have as much motivation in this game as San Diego does, but San Diego's in the worst scheduling spot. I don't think Houston's just not going to show up to this. I think Houston's still probably going to show up. Spencer Arrighetti is pitching for them. He's one of their young arms here, and his stats on the season are misleading at this point, man, with a 4.72 ERA, 1.42 whip. He's been a lot better recently. All of a sudden, he just had a really good August, 1.95 ERA in August, and was striking out a ton of guys, 3 double-digit strikeout totals. But then he had one atrocious start against Cincinnati where he didn't even make it 1 inning. So he does have these lapses, but you could say, well, that was a 3rd road start in a row coming off of Baltimore, Philly, where he threw a lot of pitches in those games, so maybe he just ran out of steam there. It was a bad spot for him. I agree. That's true, so I don't know how much to read into it, even though that was a real ugly start. And he gave up 6 unearned runs in that game, so the defense didn't do him any favors either, even though he was still horrendous in that game, putting way too many men on base. 5 hits, 3 walks in 1 inning. Yeah, you're going to get yourself in huge trouble if you do that. Although the defense caused the inning to get extended. But then he kind of bounced back from it against Oakland, who isn't that great, but he had a good performance against Oakland. So I think that Cincinnati start was more of an outlier as far as like his recent form. I think his recent form is still good, and San Diego's never seen him before. So I think that's an advantage to Arrighetti. Good young arm who the hitters have to adjust to and haven't seen him before. I think he could be in line for a good performance. And he's up against a guy who's 14 years older than him in Yu Darvish, who I think is a question mark, even though his stats are good this year still. 3.52 ERA, 1.14 whip. Darvish was injured for a lot of the season. He was pitching well before he got injured. And then since he's come back, he had one not great start and then kind of a mediocre start at Seattle, which is a pitcher's park, so that might have helped him a bit. He was pretty efficient with his pitches, though. Excuse me. And San Diego just hasn't let him go that deep into these games. It looks like they held him to a 63 pitch count there. So I don't know if he's going to be on a pitch count again this time or not. So if he is, I mean, that could be kind of unhelpful to San Diego as well there. So with the scheduling spot and with Darvish kind of being a question mark there and Arrighetti actually kind of being the pitcher who's in the better form and is the younger guy. What's up, Laney? Bet big, yeah. What I would say is you want to bankroll, man. You want to be very disciplined about this. People think that I'm a degenerate. I'm not. Like you don't want to bet the house on like one specific play. You never want to do that. You want to bet what you can afford, and you want to bet size. You want to have like the same size bet basically, or kind of make it between like a few like smaller bet sizes and maybe say, well, I'm going to make this bet slightly bigger because I have a stronger opinion on this one, but never go crazy with it. Like keep yourself disciplined. For me, I actually bet the same amount on every single bet, which maybe I shouldn't because I do have stronger feelings on some than others, but that's just the way that I've done it for forever, and it keeps me disciplined. It might be autistic, but Laney, thanks for all that you do with the Tower Gang edits, man. Everybody keeps saying every edit is better than the previous one, and I think that is the case. Like the level of edit just keeps getting better every single time. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because it's new to us every time we see it, and we don't know what to expect, and it's mind blowing every single time, man. I love it. So yeah, Houston, Spencer Arrighetti would actually be my preferred side in that one, especially because the scheduling spot's not as good for Cincinnati, and Arrighetti's unknown to San Diego's hitters. All that leads me to where am I actually making a play here, because it's not one of the games I talked about. It's not LA and Atlanta either. That's an interesting game. Big matchup there with that one. It could be a decent pitching matchup. I would look towards an under in that one, if anything, with Yamamoto pitching for the Dodgers. Their rookie that they brought over from Japan. He's been having a good season. He was injured for a decent chunk of it. He's come back, and he's been pitching well since he's been back as well. Atlanta, I believe, has never seen him before, so that's an advantage to Yamamoto. And Max Fried on the other side has been having a kind of a season it's been good overall, but he's had spots where he hasn't been good, and you can kind of pick your spots to go against Max Fried, but I don't think this is a spot where I would do it. I think he'll be pumped to face this LA offense, and he has actually pretty good historical numbers against these LA hitters, even though they're actually good. So I would lean to an under in that one, but you're playing under 7.5, although you're getting a little bit more value on it because it's gone up a little bit. LA is very public, 75% of the tickets and only 62% of the cash, so the market seems to be indicating against LA. Atlanta's the team with more to play for because they're fighting for a wild card spot. They're like really right in the thick of it right now. And LA, I don't think has any concerns about losing their division. So there is that aspect of it too, but it means the pressure's on Atlanta as well. And I think Yamamoto's the slightly better of these two starters, would be my preferred of the two starters. So that's a tough read on that one, but I like the under, like I said, even though it looks like 97% of the cash is on the over, but the ticket percentage looks like it's all over the place here. 80% of the tickets as well. So the over is going to be public. As I have said in this LA-Atlanta series, I think I played an under in one of these games, 2 games ago or something. I played an under at some point between these two teams, and I think this is a continuation of the same series. It's one of the few series that went through the weekend and continues on Monday. What's up, guys? Dirk, yeah, Cincinnati, they definitely suck. There are spots where you can play Cincinnati probably because they suck, where you can find some value on them, but Hunter Green is probably not coming back this year, and he has been their one really bright spot this year. He's been great, but he was puking all over the place on the mound a lot. Now he's out, I think, for probably the rest of the season, so that sucks. Really a blow to their starting pitching rotation there, and to us, I think, as fans, because he was fun to watch throwing those vomit balls there, those puke balls. Pistolero, what's up, man? Thanks for hanging out early in the morning. I'm getting more views because I'm throwing this up on the Tower Gang channel as well. All you people are so degenerate that you're up listening to betting talk at all hours of the day at 1:30 in the morning and at 7:30 in the morning as well. Yeah, I don't sleep at all. All right, the game I'm actually going to be on, I'm playing an under. I'm on a total today, and it's Oakland and the Chicago Cubs under 8. You had to lay an extra little bit of a price for it at -115. You can get it cheaper if you go under 7.5, which I think is fine as well, because 8 is not a key number in baseball. The keyest numbers are 9 and 7. Those odd numbers are key in baseball because that's the number that you need to break a tie. If you have a 3-3 tie or a 4-4 tie, one team has to score that additional run to win the game. So those are the key numbers in baseball. So under 7.5, not much different from under 8. And you can get plus money on the under 7.5. Either way you want to do it, I think is fine on this one. Looking at the market on this one, this is an interleague game, so it's way down here. We've seen the number go down a little bit on the total from 8 juiced to the under at -115 to -120. 57% of tickets are actually on the over in this one. Interesting that some of the play is coming in on the over as far as the public is concerned. I don't know why they'd want to play an over in this game. I guess because Oakland has a couple of good young hitters who have been kind of turning it up recently, and the Cubs kind of went through that hot stretch where they were hitting pretty well, but neither of these offenses are that potent. So I like that aspect of the under here, and we have 78% of the cash on the under here, so it looks like there may be a little bit of a pros versus Joes scenario going on in the market on the total here, and I'm going to align with the pros, man. That's what I'm doing here, and I think there are reasons to do it. I like this spot for the under here. Chicago, I was looking at it, and I'm like, man, they're in a bad spot situation, because they went out to the Pacific Coast. They won a series against the Dodgers. That's a big series win for a Cubs team that all of a sudden has risen up, and they've put themselves kind of in the wild card hunt. So Chicago's going to continue to be motivated here. And then they went and they lost the series at Colorado. It's a tough place to play, as bad as Colorado is. It's not easy to play in their home stadium in high elevation there in Denver. So Chicago's having to come off of that with no time off. That's not an easy spot, man. They're returning home. But instead of going against the Cubs, which I don't want to do because they have Shota Imanaga pitching, and I never really want to fade that guy. Imanaga's really good, and I do think he's going to have an advantage on his side of the game here today as far as his pitching versus the opposing hitters. I think he's going to have an edge there. So I don't want to fade Chicago for that reason. But because they're returning home from a road trip, and it is a bad spot for them, I think that does kind of affect the hitting. You can see the hitting sometimes be a little bit sluggish when a team is in a spot like that. So it's the offense that tends to be a little bit more affected, I think, because when they have that dominant pitcher on the mound like Imanaga, the other Japanese rookie, by the way, from him and Yamamoto, both scheduled to pitch on the same day again today. All Japan today. When you have Imanaga, who's just so good that he kind of negates how bad a spot it is, but not on the side of the hitting. The side of the hitting could still be a bit disrupted by how bad of a scheduling spot this is for Chicago. On the side of Oakland is continuing. So it does actually look like a decent situational spot for Oakland as far as the scheduling, because they're not even traveling. They're in the middle of a road trip, but they're already in Chicago because they just played the White Sox, and they just lost the series to the White Sox. Tell me when the last time the White Sox won a series was. I don't even know if they won a series this year. They probably have, but man, that is brutal. Oakland, I mean, they're not a good team, but losing a series to the White Sox, that's pretty embarrassing. So again, I think that would probably focus Oakland a little bit. But like I said, instead of trying to go with an Oakland side here, I'm going with an under in this one because I don't want to fade Shota Imanaga. He's just too good. But the pitching matchup looks like it's going to be good to play an under here. So looking at yesterday, the Athletics, the A's did not use a whole lot of their bullpen yesterday. They only used 2 guys in relief of Sears. So they only had to pitch 8 innings yesterday because they had lost the game already at that point. So the White Sox did not have to hit in the bottom of the 9th. So that kind of saves some of the A's bullpen. So I like that. And then you got the Cubs on the other side. Their bullpen isn't in bad shape either after yesterday, even though they had to play at Colorado. They only used 3 of their relief pitchers. Granted, yeah, it was a couple of their relievers who had better ERAs, true, but I don't think it was necessarily some of their actual best relievers there either. So the bullpen scenario I don't think is that bad. And plus, when you have Imanaga pitching, I don't think you're not going to have to use that much of your bullpen typically. The starting pitching matchup, I like this for the under, man. You got 2 young pitchers who are basically completely unfamiliar to the opposing hitters. So that's where I come in and I like it, man, because when the hitters aren't familiar with these pitchers, they have to adjust. They have to figure these pitchers out, and it can take a little while. I feel like a broken record because I always say this, but this is a handicapping angle I use over and over again, and it applies to both pitchers here. Joey Estes is pitching for the A's. Maybe we're even getting a little bit of value on this total here because his ERA doesn't look good, 4.36, but a 1.13 whip is pretty good, so that indicates his ERA should probably be lower. 88 to 24 strikeout walk ratio is not good. He doesn't come in and blow guys away. He's not a strikeout pitcher, but he hasn't allowed many walks either or hits. Only 109 and 117 and 2/3 innings. So that whip is low, man. He's keeping guys off the base paths, which is good. And since he had some of these rough starts here going into July, he had a really bad start against the Red Sox. But for the most part, his starts have been pretty good, aside from those 3 really outrageously bad starts. He hasn't allowed more than 4 earned runs in any of his other starts, and that even those are only 2 other starts. He's been good otherwise. And his ERA has been dropping as well. He had a 3.03 ERA in August. Going into September, it's been a little bit worse. He did have 1 bad start against Seattle, but I don't know if that means he's just out of form now. I wouldn't say that because he bounced back decently against a tough Houston lineup on the road and held them to 2 earned runs in 6 2/3 innings. So I don't think that he's just all of a sudden struggling again because that start against Houston was pretty good. I don't really think he's going to be in a letdown spot when he's matched up against one of the kind of elite pitchers in baseball now at this point. So I expect him to be good. And like I said, against the Cubs, I think they're going to have an adjustment period because only Paredes has ever seen him before, and he's 0 for 1 against him with a strikeout. So the Cubs essentially have never faced Estes before. And then on the other side, before I get out of here real quick, I don't know if there's anything I really even need to say about Imanaga. He's having a great rookie season, 3.03 ERA, 1.02 whip. He did have 1 kind of speed bump in the middle of the season, 1 really bad start against the Mets. But if you throw that out, I mean, look at these numbers, man. He allowed 4 earned runs against St. Louis. But other than that, I think he's allowed fewer than 4. If you take away those, and that start against Milwaukee, there where he gave up 7, I think. Take those 3 starts out, and he hasn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in any of his starts all season. 3.03 ERA, 1.02 whip, extremely low numbers there. 159 to 25 strikeout walk ratio is pretty dominant. Really good ratio there. The 26 home runs is really his only bad stat. He has been a little bit, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, but the long ball has hurt him a little bit. 138 hits allowed and 116 to third innings pitched is pretty good as well, though. He's held the number of hits down a bit as well. So he's just been pitching really well recently as well. Like, since that bad Red Sox start, aside from that 4-run outing against St. Louis, he's been in very good form, putting together just really good start after really good start. And then he had this no-hit 7-inning performance against Pittsburgh and didn't really suffer a letdown after that, having to face the Dodgers after that, a good hitting team, and he put another good start in after that. So I just think he's so consistent that I don't expect him to really be in like letdown spots here necessarily, even though it is against a bad team. And based on the scheduling spot, if he were to succumb to a letdown, it could be in this spot, but I don't really think so because he's just been so consistently good, and Oakland has never seen him before, so Oakland's hitters are going to have to adjust to him as well. So on both sides of this matchup, you got a situation where neither starter has been seen before by the opposing hitters. So that's my play here in baseball, is an under in Oakland and Chicago Cubs. Under 8 minus 115 I thought was kind of the best option out on the board right now, but I mean, you could potentially wait a little bit. I don't know if I would because the line looks like it is moving in the direction of the under with the amount of cash coming in on the under. It seems like there are professionals coming in on the under. And, of course, like I said, I am on the Atlanta Falcons +6 in Monday Night Football as well. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Yeah, based bluegrass. Yeah, I only go live at 8. That's true. No, I'm the only one who would go live at 8 a.m. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if you'd see any of my co-hosts jump in this early, but I'm the one that has an actual job, which I have to get to right now, baby. So have a good one, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. Peace out.